back to the January recording of Ms.Dr.Kenya. This conversation is going to be different. Up until now, I've always had a panel, an adult who is an expert, probably an educator or an administrator or a parent, myself, and then a member of the youth council. But today it will just be me and a member of the youth council. And I'm kind of excited that it was set up this way because y'all, this is not just an ordinary member of the youth council. I have the honor of introducing you to Ayema K. Owono. Did I say that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure that I pronounced your name correctly. Um, Ayema was supposed to participate in last month's conversation. Again, I wasn't able to get him, but he has written a book called Word Up in Spite of. And it is an amazing, very interesting collection of reflections. So when I went through the book, Ayema has pictures, and then next to those pictures, he has a description of what it is that he was thinking about, feeling, so on and so forth in that moment. Now, I'm not the author of the book, so I'm not going to describe it. I'm going to allow him to describe it to you, but I am glad that we have all the time just to speak with him because he penned some really beautiful reflections, some really deep reflections about being a student in high school, about being a man of color, about dealing with upset, frustration, worrying, all the things. And so I really want us to take the time to peel back the layers and learn more from him. So Ayema is our expert today. Before we go any further, I do want to properly introduce him to you. So, and look, he's very fancy, y'all. He had the whole author's bio in his book, right? And so I'm going to do the due diligence and read it to you so that I can properly introduce him to you. So Oyema K. Owono, youngest of four, senior energy manager at home, where he liberally provides laughter and fun, is a senior at Charles H. Flowers High School, where he serves as ambassador of the Principal's Action Council. He is duly enrolled at Prince George's County Community College through the 3D Scholars Program. Ayema is passionate about amplifying youth voices through community service and engagement, and he is committed to working with leaders and mentors to build leadership capacity. He is a member of First Baptist Church of Glenarden Youth Leadership Council, where he enjoys serving the church and community. Ayema received the Maryland Governor's Citation in 2022 as a public health youth ambassador, and he is also the recipient of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Voice of Democracy Award. I'm giving you, this is my version of a standing ovation. Welcome to Miss Dr. Kenya. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well, blessed and highly favored. Thank you for having me. I am so excited.
Well, wonderful. Tell the folks a little bit about you and your inspiration behind writing the book.
Sure, let's get right into it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who's watching. My name is Ayema K. Owona. Um, of course, I am a senior at Charles Herbert Flowers High School, and that's really where all of this journey started. Uh, During the pandemic, this book was meant to be a beacon of some of the things that the youth in my community were all facing. One thing that we stopped doing was we stopped communicating with each other and we stopped expressing ourselves. And I think the reason why I was truly moved to write this book was the day that I found out that my opinion really matters.
Mm.
So when that day came, I took it upon myself to really write, because taking pictures is something that I've done for a long time. But I realized that it's not a good enough way to truly express yourself so that someone can understand what you're like really, really going through. So it took that. I took that, and I took that opinion that I had, and I brought it together as one. And the word, the title itself is a play on words. A lot laced throughout the book, you'll find different, analogies and different, differently worded, weaved sentences that are very artistic and abstract, but they all really come back to connection of self.
Mhm.
So the title "Word Up," in spite of, if we break it down, literally means word up, a positive word, right? A word in the upwards direction, in spite of whatever you're going through. So the title isn't really just a title that stops at the end of it. The title is really a prompt. Title is really a prompt. As you read the book and you go through each and every single one of those words, and you see how you can connect through, hey, I went through that, or hey, that was similar to something that my friend went through. What can you do? And this is the question that I love asking others. What can you do to give yourself and others a word up?
Mm.
That's really why I was inspired to write this book.
Oh my goodness. You said so much. I have a million questions already. Um, I want to start with, you said that the book was birthed out of your own personal experience and you learning that your voice matters. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
Absolutely. Um, Facing hardships. That was the question. Yeah. And kind of just what this was birthed out of. Um, During the pandemic, I think I faced a lot, as did everybody. Um, but one thing that I realized was that everybody, with the problems that they faced, they might have been, from a bird's eye view, they might have definitely seemed like night and day. But to the individuals, they're all on the same level. When you take a bottle from a baby and the baby starts crying, right? They're distraught. Their world is falling down. They need their bottle right now. But to an adult who's gone through life and who is going through so much, right? You know, when during the pandemic, there were less jobs were closing. How can I sustain this? How can I sustain that? Right? You're dealing with problems that are so much different than a bottle being taken from someone.
Right.
But to that baby, that's their world.
Yeah.
And to the adult individual, that's their world. And so these dilemmas that we faced as a community all served on the same level. So that's really what this book was birthed out of. How I can't diminish my problems as a youth because I believe that I am insufficient, to be heard, right?
Mm.
That I am less important than what's going on outside. Everybody has their own individual struggles. But as a community, when we come together and realize that we're all one and that they're all on the same level in our eyes, it takes one to help another,
Mhm.
right? And so that's why, you lock arms, right? That's what they used to do. They used to lock arms and used to hold each other in times of need. So during the pandemic, some of the real issues that I think I faced, the adversity that I faced, were things of like character, right? Who am I? Who am I going to be? Identity, um, vision, right? Where did I see myself? How do I see myself? How do I speak to myself? See, a lot of people think that, success comes overnight. But I think one of the hardest parts about success and being proficient in any circumstance, any field, any profession, um, it requires you to go from outside looking in,
Mhm.
right? You're required to really tackle the adversity that you face. You can't let it just sit. So those were the things that I faced during the pandemic, and they were huge.
Mhm.
They were huge. So that's really why this was birthed out of that lack, not having certain relationships, not having, I'm a very, I'm a very interpersonal being, right? I love interacting with others. I love my community. I love serving, right? I just love people,
Mhm.
right? But when that was taken away from me, when that communication was taken away from me, I almost didn't know what to do with myself. And so when you are as extroverted as me, one thing that I think I had to learn was how to shift, to pivot, to become an ambivert. How can I be with myself? How can I, when I'm not going to see anybody for a week or a month, what can I do to just sit with myself and be comfortable and be okay? So that was my journey during the pandemic. And so it is expressed in Word Up in spite of. And I hope that all who read it are truly touched and inspire someone else to know that they are worth it and they are just as important as everyone else.
Yeah, so I want to take a deeper dive still, but hang with me. Hold on for a second, because what I heard you say, you didn't say this specifically, but ultimately what I heard you say is at some point, you felt like problems perhaps may have been ranked ordered. And again, this is just um what I intuited from what you were saying, and that perhaps because you are a young person, a teenager, and you knew that other people, adults in particular, right? Because you called out adults and teenagers, were dealing with things that um, may seem more impactful, like providing basic needs, food, clothing, shelter. Um, that may be a higher order, higher priority for those adults, right? But through your experience, you came to realize or accept that while that is important for them, right? And it's a very real need, the fact that you were struggling with the isolation that came with the pandemic, and you were learning how to pivot, and to go from being an extrovert to an ambivert, and learning that particular dance, that was a struggle for you, and that your struggle was just as real and just as serious as adults who were dealing with other things related to the pandemic. First of all, I think that's so incredibly insightful of you. Thank you for saying that, highlighting that, and calling that out, because that needed to be heard for someone. Um, how did you get how did you get to that place when you felt like, okay, both two things can be true, right? Like the adults in the world can be dealing with something very heavy, and I too can be dealing with something very heavy, though they are two completely different things. Like my voice counts too. How did you get to that place?
It's definitely a loaded question.
It
Uh,
is.
and I'll say that as a young male in this society, just as a preface to before we do that dive, um, to my young men out there, I know it's hard to express yourself when it really counts. I know it's hard to when somebody asks you a question and you're like, you know the answer to the question, but it's hard. You don't want to go there. You know, one thing that I am on a journey to learn right now, right? Because you never stop learning, right? Um, is there's power in vulnerability. Uh, there's power in vulnerability when you are open to others, when you are open to people, not open to everybody, but when you are open to people that actually want the best for you, right? Ms. Dr. Kenya is here to impact a community. Why wouldn't you want to be vulnerable and say, you know what, hey, listen, I went through this and I know you might be going through something similar, but this is how I did it. I know you can do it too. That's all it takes, right? And so I am going to be that example and also provide some of that vulnerability, because the truth of the matter is we all went through a grave situation during the pandemic, right? And I'll paint this picture in your head. You have two people in two different rooms, right? They've both had a long day, both gone through so much, and they both cry themselves to sleep. Now, they're crying themselves to sleep, but their faces in a pillow. Do you think either of them can hear the other?
No.
They can't. So that goes to show that you can live under the same roof. You can be less than 10 feet away from someone else, but their world might be as in as many shambles as yours is.
Mhm.
So that deep dive, right? Coming to that conclusion of how um my opinion was valid and how I wanted to express myself, there came a time where I had the process where I didn't want to be sad anymore. Um, During the pandemic, you know, I think a lot of youth also face something that I'll get very, very real, and it's a tricky, very tricky topic. But self-harm, right? And mental health is so much more, big. It's so much bigger. It's so much more weighted than just a flash word. Hey, mental health this, mental health that, right? We got to understand what we're talking about. And mental health will come in many a different form. It'll come in the form of the individual, right? It takes many different shapes and sizes. Um, and so what I faced was a decision that would have ultimately impacted my family and my community for the rest of their lives, right? And I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And I remember being in my room during that time, during that season, right? Because everything is a season. You're not going to be there for long, right? Um, I said, I don't want this for myself. And I dropped everything that I had in my hand and I just began to pray. You know, I believe that it takes faith to get out of some of the situations that we find ourselves in, because adversity will never stop. Adversity continuously evolves and it continuously finds different routes to reach an individual. But it takes faith to know that although there's a cloud in front of me, I have faith that there is a road that I am already walking on. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. I'm going to walk through this fog even though I can't see, right? And I'm going to trust and I'm going to have faith in the things that I cannot believe, I cannot see, right? I can't see that road, but I'm still going to walk it. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other and trust that I'm going straight. Um, so that was what my journey looked like. And that day I realized that if what I'm going through can lead me to such a grave decision, what is somebody else going through, right? What is my sister going through? What is my mom going through? What is my best friend going through? And in that moment, it was like, right, a wake up call to say like, hey, if I need help, I need to ask for it. And if other people need help, but they can't ask for it, what can I do to bring the help to them? So Word Up initially, it actually started with daily affirmations. That was the idea. Um, so that those are some of the things that I faced in my journey that caused me to want to become a person of impact, of positive impact and change in my community. And overall, to see an engagement between the community of all ages and experiences uh, to mend something that was lost during that time. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your transparency and your vulnerability. I do truly, truly appreciate that. And it's interesting, right? As you were sharing and talking about how folks can live in the same house, for example, and have like 4 or 5 completely different experiences. It's interesting that you and I had similar experiences, right? And that caused us to respond in very similar ways. So the pandemic was hard for me too. Um, for lots of different reasons. I work in education, so finances were not my concern. But at the time of the pandemic, I was the senior director of school mental health for DC Public Schools. And so I was responsible for ensuring the mental wellness of children, parents, and educators. And it was a very, very heavy burden that I ate, slept, and drank for many, many different reasons. But in particular, Emma, going back to what you were saying, because I knew people were hurting and I was trying to figure out how do we help these people. And I don't think people may have connected these dots, but because our president at the time did not take the pandemic seriously or COVID seriously, that meant like that people like me were without guidance on how to move forward. And we were working with families and young people across lines. So it just made things very, very difficult. And I had to pivot and think outside of the box while at the same time holding on to my own sanity. And throughout that experience, I became overwhelmed myself. And I too decided that I will not participate in my own suffering. I no longer want to be sad. I too had to rely heavily on my spirituality. You mentioned prayer in your reflection called grounding. You mentioned journaling at some point. You mentioned affirmations. I used all the things. And I also had a therapist. So I had Jesus and a therapist
That's right.
to get me through. But out of that, where you have written Word Up, in spite of, I decided to offer an app to young people to help them to learn how to navigate their mental health and their mental wellness and just give folks everything that they needed in an easy to use format. Um, so I understand what that process looks like. I was over here going through a parallel journey myself. So thank you for sharing that part of your story, and know that other people will be better for it. How about that?
Right.
So one of the things that I did appreciate about the book is that you did again offer very real, very practical um, strategies that people can use right here in the here and now. Um, you talk about in your reflection called um, forgiveness or isolation. I believe it's isolation on page 25, where you encourage other high school students to talk with someone to quote unquote, like break free of the isolation. I think that you just kind of explained the why of that.
Yeah.
You talk about in grounding on page 40 that you asked for the gift of sight. I'm assuming that you were referring to prayer and spirituality, which you also talked about. You talk about how the book was affirmations. And so I am assuming that each of the words that you chose, like forgiveness and equilibrium and placidity, like actually is your word up, right?
Right.
Like lean into this particular thing. But what really, really excited me is that in the back of the book, let me see if I can go there real quickly. You have space for readers to reflect
That's
and
right.
to capture their own thoughts, and to create their own safe space within the book.
That's right.
Now, I am an avid believer in the power of journaling. Like, I'm going to tell you, Ayema, about 95% of my clients right now are journaling because it can be so incredibly powerful. So I can only assume that that was one of the strategies and skills that you utilized, and you too found it to be a powerful exercise.
Yeah. One of the things that I think, and I tell people this all the time. They ask me, "Hey, what's your favorite word, or what's your favorite piece of the book?" And I'm like, it's not the word. My favorite part of the book is the back, like you showed. That reader's reflective journal is one of the most powerful pieces in that entire book. And if you read what's right under that title, it says, "Welcome to your space," right?
Mhm.
In all capital letters, in an attempt to bring out some sort of exclamation, like, hey, this is your space, right? This is your time. You don't have to be afraid that somebody's going to judge you. You don't have to be afraid that someone is going to read what you want to write. It is your space. It is your thoughts. It is your time, right? And so that's really the biggest piece for me, because that's where it starts. It starts with the man in the mirror. I can confidently say that I began journaling after my, the cancellation of that grave decision I was about to make, right? When wrestling with emotions and you don't know, who's winning, and you just keep wrestling and you keep fighting and you keep fighting. All of this, everything that's in your mental, it'll just continue to swirl and swirl and swirl. But you don't have anyone to talk to. I tell people all the time that one of the leading causes of, early disease and sickness and even death is a lack of communication,
Mm.
because we are not meant to be alone. We're not meant to be by ourselves. If a crowd is here and they're having a great time, and you live a full life of being that one bystander, right? It'll take a toll in the long run on your spiritual, on your mental, right? Because life is a lot more spiritual than anything, right? We don't see what's going on the inside of us, but we believe that it's there, you know? So I tell you, that's really what it's meant to, like, kind of trigger. That's what it's meant to, like, set you off, to say, hey, I'm gonna talk to myself. I'm gonna write to myself. I'm gonna talk to myself in a positive way, to give myself a word up, to know that this is my space, to know that this is my time. And from there, I tell others that, who are comfortable, right? Share it. When you're comfortable with yourself, when you're comfortable with your story in your own skin, share what you know to others, other people that have this book, right? Others that know about the goodness that it can bring, and the strategies that you can pull out of it, right? Share with them, connect with them, collaborate with them. That's what this is all about. Word Up isn't just any kind of book. It's meant to be a scaffolding. It's a threshold, a platform for members of all ages in the community to step on top of it and say, let's do this together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, Emma, what you just described is what I would call in my world like a peer support group, right?
Yes.
Such that you can go to your best friend or your parents, whoever you feel comfortable in your circle, like sharing, like I have been going through all of the things. So that's peer support. But I am curious as to um why do you think that people do not go and seek the help of a professional therapist?
Wow. You know, it's because of the lack of respect for mental health. And let's really get real, right? Let's talk about this. Because we can talk about the current state of the world and economy and mental, all of that. But this really starts from generations ago. This really, really starts from our grandparents and our great grandparents who didn't have the opportunity to know that they mattered.
Mm,
Let's really get into it. In the old Constitution, in the first Constitution, people of color, excuse me, were classified as 3/5 of a whole person.
right.
We never identified what those 2/5 were. We never did. We never put them in a category,
Right.
right? So when our forefathers, when our great grandparents, when our great 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 grandparents, all those generations ago, what they knew was to get in, work until they can't anymore, sleep as many hours as they possibly could, no more than 4 or 5, and do it again. That's how our generations, that's how they came down, right? And it's painful. It is painful, but pain is what causes leaders to rise up, right? Adversity is what causes you to pivot, right? You can walk forward all you want, but when your back is against the wall, you have to pivot to move out of it. You have to move. You have to shift. And that's really what, when you look at the way that this structure has been set up, that's why all the way it's a trickle down effect. That's what they call it, a trickle down effect,
Mhm.
right? That's why this generation, we can't express ourselves anymore. I was just having a conversation with one of the SRO, the school resource officers at my high school, Charles River Flowers, the great, great mecca of excellence, right? And I was telling him something about an experience that I went through, another class that I was in, and it's a very, very extensive class, about 3 hours, something of that nature. And I told him every answer, every question, everything that the instructor wanted me to read, I'm the first one to raise my hand. I'm the first person to participate. I'm the first person to say, "Hey, how are you doing, sir? I hope you're doing well." Right? And in this generation, members of my youth community might say, "Why do you do that? You're doing too much," or it's too extra, right? And I look at them and I'll tell them that participation is the symbol of you being engaged, right? You can't be in a classroom, you can't be in an environment and you don't participate because that tells you you're not engaged. That's what that means. All of this boils down to the real engagement in our communities. And the truth is we don't have that anymore. We've lost that. It's down to a brittle, right? We don't have it. So I broke it down to him and I had to correct myself because I prefaced what I said by saying, "Oh, I don't want to sound like I'm doing too much." And I thought, why did I say that? Because the truth of the matter is when you leverage, right? That's another word. When you leverage your circumstance, I'll participate for 10 minutes straight. I'll read everything. I'll answer every question. But for the rest of those 2, 3 hours, he wouldn't call on me once. he wouldn't look at me one time because he
Right.
knows that participation goes hand in hand with this one student. As a community, we make our lives harder by being quiet when we shouldn't. Uh-oh, stick a pen. We make our lives harder when we don't participate. We make our lives harder when we don't express ourselves, right? And so one word, we're talking about all the words in the book, and I can't wait for, the listeners to get a copy, right? One word that's in this book that I had to take actually a very long time to learn, because each of these words really coincide with the principle, right? You mentioned forgiveness, that's a principle. You mentioned equilibrium, that's a principle. You mentioned grounding, that's a principle. These are all things, all of these words are action items. Each and every single one of these words are action items. So this is the word that I want to say. Discernment. It's one of my favorite words in that book, discernment, because it was one of the words that I had to take so long to actually learn about. I think it's word 20. It was the longest word that I had to learn. See, before I wrote this book, I went through each and every single one of those principles to grasp them, to firmly understand what they mean. I went through them with my support system, right? So my mom, my siblings, right? My near friends, my mentors at the time, which I didn't have many, right? Figuring out what can I do to better understand how to, implement this into my life. So on the other end of that extreme, right, and the extreme I'm referring to is making your life harder by not talking, by not speaking up, by not participating, by not being engaged, right? On the other end of that extreme, we look at overextending ourselves. We look at pouring out of a cup that's not even all the way full yet, right? We look at making ourselves too vulnerable. All of these circumstances boil down to the word that I said earlier, which is leverage, right? Knowing when to use this and knowing when to use that, right? Okay, I'm going to participate here and I'm going to speak up and I'm going to engage and I'm going to connect with this person, right? But I'm also not going to say too much because I don't want to put myself and others at risk. Being engaged and being present in the moment gives us that ability to think about what we're doing, right? And so it all comes down to discernment. So that's really why I think that people of our generation don't look for help. Because one, they don't know how to leverage being too vulnerable and too open. And two, and that image, right? That image of being extra or doing too much. Ego is an acknowledgement of one's character, of oneself, right? Knowing that you have an ego is being one with the fact that you have a personality. But when our ego controls our decisions, the the baby of that is being an egotistical human being. When you can't differentiate your character from your decisions, then you just become mushed up and you don't know where you're headed next, right? So the real action item for us as a community is to pause where we are, think about what we're doing, think about where we're going, right? Plan, build, connect, and collaborate with others, and then take that first step, right? It's all about one step at a time. And I even said that in my book.
Let's go back to the book, right? Because while reading the book, there was a word that stood out for me. It is not the title of one of the reflections. It was embedded actually in the reflection. Um,
Mm.
in the reflection of word up perception. And the word is deracinate. I actually had to look it up because I don't recall ever hearing that word before, but I wanna read what you said here because it's comparable or complementary to what you're saying now. And you said the message resonated because that tree was me. And on the opposite side of that, the picture that you have of that is of a tree that looks like in the fall because it's very colorful and beautiful. Smiling and still, when in reality, I wanted to scream, shout, and protest. My internal scene dragged out of me a challenge to discover the ability to effectively communicate, to protest peacefully, ensuring someone hears me, anyone, understanding that in the midst of turmoil, if my tree does not become still, it will deracinate. And that is ultimately what you just described right now, but in further detail, is it not?
Yes. Um, it's each and every single one of these pictures and these words, as you read them back to me, it's like I quickly just experienced what I went through again.
Mm.
But like I said earlier, that pain is what makes leaders rise. Uh, that day I didn't know how to ask for what I wanted. I didn't know how to speak on what I was going through.
Mm.
And what I find, as an author, you can connect with some of your creations so much more like differently than everyone else, right? You made it. And so it takes that communication to really connect with others and say, this is what it takes that, this is what I went through. Paint the picture for them. So let me paint that picture for you. So perception really, it goes hand in hand with how other people see you, right?
Mhm.
It's perception is a word about sight, right? I perceive Miss Dr. Kenya as an amazing human being that will truly impact this community, right? I perceive myself as someone who is obedient to the will and to the way of positivity, right? But in that picture, it was one of the windiest, craziest days that we had seen in Maryland, to the point where it was dangerous to drive. Branches were flying, leaves were falling. You know it's bad when the little leaves in your driveway start to do the little circle whirlwind. Like, yeah, right? It was horrible out there. But something just clicked when I realized that because the tree was so beautiful and colorful and vibrant, when I took the picture, the tree looked perfectly still. And I'm like, that's not right. That's not the reality. Everybody's reality may look so, so scary. But the reason why I use the word so powerful, because deracinate isn't just like destroy, or because I'm referring to a tree, right? Uproot, right? Deracinate quite literally means to like dissolve, to
Mm.
disappear, to rip apart. Like deracinate means, to make it very plain, cease to exist,
Mm.
right? And so that's where, if we tie it back to
That
the
just gave
grave,
me, I'm not trying to interrupt you, but that just gave me chills. I get it now.
yeah, yeah. When you connect it back to that grave decision we were speaking about earlier, right? And I'll make it plain, suicide, right? Those are some of the things that we face in the community, and they're not easy. It's not easy to say to someone, hey, I need help. I'm facing this right now. But if you try for so long to continue to put up a facade, a wall, right, to have other people to perceive you as something you're not because your reality is in so much turmoil, there will be a time where if you don't speak up and speak out, you will deracinate, right? Because, and I believe that nature all talks to itself, right? So if the tree doesn't say to the wind, yo, chill, right? The roots will get pulled out.
Right.
right? The tree is going to fall over. The branches will fall over, right? It's going to deracinate. It's going to cease to exist, right? Roots will be upbrought. So one of the biggest things about this book is that there's a connection and an analogy, right? I spoke about that in the very beginning, how a lot of this book, it's a mirror. A lot of this book is really just a mirror principle about how what you're going through is almost synonymous with what something else is going through or someone else is going through, right? And so it really takes that word up, that positive word to help someone else. And I'll say one more thing about just this piece. The word that I truly want, a takeaway that I want, you and everybody else that's listening, it's feedback, right? Feedback is so, so important. Remember those two extremes that we were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? How sometimes being engaged and speaking up and speaking out, right, will make our lives easier. But on the other end of that, doing too much of it can put us and others at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Discernment is in the direct middle of that. To know, can I speak to this person? Can I tell this person this? Can I trust this person? And trust is a heavy, heavy word. Sometimes my heart skips a beat when I say the word trust because it's a scary word. It's a powerful word, right? But we have to know that the people who are trained, like you, right? The illustrious Ms.Dr.Kenya has spent years in education to learn how can I help, right? Their being, their essence is in and it's rooted in the principle of how can I help? So it takes us as youth and it takes us as adults, it takes us as elderly, it takes us as babies, right? Because babies, they're not afraid. They'll come up to you, they'll tug on your shirt and they'll say, goo goo gaga, I need a bottle. Hello. Like, goo goo gaga, I'm hungry. What's going on?
Right.
Right? So word up is about learning from every level. A baby can make it plain to me what I can't understand as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
An eloquent teenager like myself can make it plain to an adult that's been struggling to connect the dots because we all are looking at life from a different perspective. And it takes all of those perspectives to create a coherent and cohesive piece. So feedback is what I want you to take away. Am I going to listen to you when you're coming to me to your issues, with your issues and with your problems, right? Because that means you're trusting me, right? Am I going to listen to you as just a sentient being, right? Just a living person that has their own experiences and intriguing, like, you know, things, things that they go through? Or am I going to listen to you to respond?
Right.
Am I going to listen to you just to hear you? Or am I going to listen to you for a solution? When people, and this is funny, in my community, all my peers and my friends will say, man, this girl came up to me and she told me that my stomach hurts and my stomach is hurting. And it's been such a bad day because my stomach is hurting. And I said, well, did you eat? And they say no. And then I say, well, did you drink water? And then they'll say no. See, it's not always about the solution.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about the solution. If my stomach is grumbling and having a full-on conversation with me, that means it's time to eat.
Right.
But if I express to someone that my stomach is hurting right now, there can be one of two things that happen. Either I need you to say, what should I do? And then that means, okay, let me give you a solution. Have you tried eating? Right? Or the other end of that, which is just, hey, I'm sorry that your stomach is hurting. I really hope you feel better. What does it take? What does it take from us to understand and know that feedback and listening to people just as they are can make or break a decision that can impact you and others for the rest of their lives? When I went through, because it doesn't just happen all at once, right? When I was about to make that grave decision, I went to someone right before. I didn't have tears in my eyes. I wasn't, in rags, and I wasn't, so obviously in distress. And that's what I want to let, you and others know. The people who might not look like they're distressed, that doesn't mean that they're not going through it. Check up on your friends, check up on your parents, right? Check up on your classmates and your teachers, just because, right? What goes around comes around. And after a while, when you continuously, make sure the members of your community are okay, that favor is going to be returned, right? But I went to someone and I said, hey, I need you right now. Hey, if you have a couple moments to spare, I need to talk to you. I need to be with you, right? I just need to be with someone else besides myself, because I don't want to do something that I will regret. And they kicked me out.
Mm.
They kicked me out on the phone, boisterous laughing, and so connected and engaged with people of their own, groups, right? Groups I didn't have. I didn't have a solid friend group that I would call every day and laugh through the pain and through the suffering of being alone and staring at the same four walls every day. I didn't have that. But that person that I went to didn't know what I was going through.
Mhm.
I guarantee you, with every fiber in my being, if I said, hey, I'm about to do this, I am about to do something that I am going to regret. If I said that, they would drop everything that they had in their hand and run to me and hold me and, put me into their embrace. Because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, and when the dust settles, we all still have love for one another.
Mhm.
And the more that we try to, delude ourselves with thinking that that's not the case, is the more that we're going to struggle. So feedback is critical. It is essential. It is essential to the plans that we need to impart as a community, to know and discern when and when not to listen. That's
So,
my piece for perception.
so Ayema, I am going to ask you a probing question, and I feel like you've been so vulnerable already. And I don't want to push you beyond your comfort level. So if I'm going too far, say that and I'll stop. But my question is, what stopped you from saying specifically, I'm struggling right now and I need your help? Like, for clearly communicating what you were going through.
The biggest thing that I was actually afraid of, to make it very plain, was no.
Mm.
Um, I remember that day, just kind of going through the motions. It was another day, right? Not knowing when I could see my friends again, not knowing when I would have to stop, you know, staying up all night because I was, afraid of having to do stuff the next day, right? Like I literally remember, and it's probably one of the reasons why it took like a good year and a half to fix my sleep schedule. Um, but I literally, like, I wouldn't sleep because I didn't want the next day to come. I didn't want to have to sit on Zoom and listen to this teacher and that teacher and just all of that. I didn't want to have to go through it. But what stopped me was no.
Mhm.
You know, like imagine expressing something like that and someone says no. Um, I felt like part of me felt like I didn't matter, you know? Um, and you gotta roll with the punches. You have to roll with the punches. And this is, not to make it so grave, but to put a little bit more of a little positive tone on it, right? Do you know what the word now stands for?
I can't say that I do.
In our generation, right? Our us young folk, we call a W, right, a win, right? Um, so the word now, right, which is NOW, in all caps, is the word no, NO, with a couple of ups and downs. That's what the word now means. And it's so artistic. I love it so much. I love that analogy so much because it's really the frame of mind of why a lot of us go through what we go through.
Mhm.
But we have to understand the urgency of right now. I can go outside right after this and try and do something that's wonderful for the community or whatever. And they tell me to my face, no. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop there because that's just a down. That's the first part of the W, right? Then I'm going to get a yes somewhere else. And that's another up. Then I'm going to get a no somewhere else, right? But then I'm going to get that yes because I didn't stop fighting. I didn't stop fighting. I didn't give up, right? I didn't do anything that I would regret or that my family would regret or the people that I knew and loved would regret. I was listening to a song once that said, and just this one verse that he said, suicide doesn't stop the pain, you're only moving it, the lives that you're ruining. And it spoke volumes to me. If I am in pain and I feel that I'm not going to be heard, I feel that I'm not going to be cared for, excuse me, and I make a decision that grave, all I do is move my pain and place it onto another. And that's a pain that somebody's going to have to live through or live with for the rest of their lives. A perpetuating amount of pain. And for what? Constant pain with no healing is going to damage our society as a whole. Forget community, because community is local. Our society, life as we know it. If there is no positivity, if there is no light in a sea of darkness, you are bound to get lost. So that's what stopped me. And what I did was, well, I took it upon myself to say, I am going to establish a relationship with this person. I am going to learn about this person. I am going to have this person learn about me. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that with this person, with this loved one, I will never feel like that again. A relationship is a two-way street. And I remember, and it's actually funny. I oftentimes forget some of these circumstances that I've gone through, but I remember the day that I told them why I was so dejected that day. Because during the pandemic, you were dejected every day, so who would really know, right? I remember telling them, and they cried and they cried and they cried and they cried and they kept crying, hugging me and holding me and saying, I'm sorry and I'm sorry. The truth of the matter is, our reality is so similar. But all it takes is somebody, one person, to drop that wall. And to drop that wall in moderation. Guard your heart, but leave a window or two open. Right? Leave a space. You don't have to have trust issues. You don't have to be, so locked off to the rest of society, because you can't do it alone. And on that day, I couldn't do it alone. And so, for me to really just close that chapter and to leave that topic where it is after this is, as I was about to follow through, I felt a hand on me saying, no, you are worth far more anything that you're facing right now. Your impact is so much greater. You cannot remove a force like that from this earth this prematurely. So earlier I mentioned dropping everything and praying. But it was so much more than that. That was my true wake-up call. An out-of-body experience. Knowing that this isn't the time, and there will never be a time. I've never, as much adversity as I've faced, because the adversity only got worse. I never got to a position where I was that low again. And I promised myself that. So the journey is not pretty at all. The journey is so far from simple. You're going to have to climb Mount Everest a couple times. And sometimes life will be so easy, you just slide down the valley. But remember that once you're in that valley, you don't need to stay there. You got to keep climbing back up.
So, Emma, what I heard you say is that you were afraid that you would not be seen and heard. And so I want to stop and acknowledge the very, very real fear. And I am grateful that you had that encounter with the Holy Spirit. That's what you described to me. Like, we're both Christians. We both go to First Baptist Church in Glenart. And what you just
That's
described,
right.
an encounter with the Holy Spirit. And I'm so for God's intervention, because as you were sharing, all the things that you articulated were definitely things that I was thinking to myself. And that is, you are such an incredibly bright, and not bright just with intelligence, but bright as it relates to having a beautiful soul, right? Really connected to people, wanting to use your life, your voice, your experiences as a platform, and to be so sure at the age of are you 16 or 17?
16.
At the age of 16, right? Um, I am grateful that you found the strength to listen to the Holy Spirit, because God can challenge you at times. And the path that God can put you on can be very scary and overwhelming. I often think about Joseph and I think about David,
Sure.
and knowing that they were anointed and called and appointed, and still went through pits and still found themselves in the cave of Adullam, right? So
Right.
um but I'm just so grateful. Let me just sum it up that way. I am so grateful that you found the strength, that you did your journaling, that you did eventually speak to someone, that you did find affirmations, that you did find utilizing the pictures that you knew had enough sense to know how to pray to get yourself um to where you are now. And where you are now is so incredibly amazing. I hope that you never have another experience. I heard you say that you've never been that low before and you have no intentions of allowing yourself to get there, but it's going to definitely take work, right?
Indeed,
So
indeed.
yeah, it's continual work and continual progress. But I want you to know that you are seen and you are heard. You always have someone available to if for you. If nothing else, you can pick up the phone and call me. I will make sure that I give you my cell phone number at the end of this, right? So that you can always pick up the phone and call me. And we can talk it out. I can just listen if that's all you need. Like whatever you need. If you need to be affirmed, we can do that. If you need solutions, we can do that. If you just want to tell me that your stomach hurts, I'm here for it,
I
right?
hear you.
But for others who may not have access to that, I would be remiss if I didn't let y'all know that you can definitely pick up the phone and call 988. Like this is literally the crisis helpline for folks who are experiencing mental health crises. You can always call 911. But 988 actually has licensed clinical therapists that are available to you. On the Kaleidoscope, the K-Scope Wellness and Education app, we do talk about suicidal ideation, and there are a plethora of resources there in addition to 988 and 911. There are several other resources there because some of our struggles are specific to how we identify. And so there are some hotlines that you can reach out to based upon the nature of your struggles, for lack of better words. But I created this particular platform, the YouTube channel, specifically to give youth voice, to let you know that your voice counts. So as Ayema has already said, please do not cease to use your voice,
Yeah.
and that you are seen and heard here, if no place else.
I was just about to say that, I'm beyond grateful for those words. Um, but I truly want this message to be driven home to anyone who's listening to this. And I mean this when I say this. You are not alone. You are far from alone. So far. And there are probably some people who are just listening just to listen. Their life may be fine. But even when the times aren't that tough, you still have people in your corner to paint a different picture on life, to add a little bit more vibrance. So, in turn, each and every single one of you are heard. Each and every single one of you are seen. I see you. And we're here for you. So, I know that K-Scope app, hello. I got it on my phone and everything. It is a wonderful app. It is a wonderful app. The Kscope app has just been, oh my goodness, a game changer. To information just right there. You don't have to ask questions about why you do what you do, or be, out of touch with who you are. Definitions, videos, explanations, right? And most importantly, connections. So we're all a community. And I truly, truly look forward to everything that you all have in store. Ms. Dr. Kenya, thank you so much for having me. I am honored. And I will continue to use my voice to do what I know must be done. And so I just thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. I have so much to unpack right now. I'm grateful. Thank you so much, not just for um your kind words about me in the app, but again, I feel like your story is really, really going to impact a lot of people for all the right reasons. So thank you for your vulnerability, if nothing else, and your transparency. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome. And remember to give yourself and others a word up.
Um, do you want to close out with the word up?
Yes.
What's your word for the people today?
A word for the people today. Based off of what we talked about, I'll give you all another sneak peek. But the word that you're gonna close out on today is transfiguration. Transfiguration. Um, it is a word with the base form is to transform. Um, so today, make the decision, the urgency of now, face those no's, but at the end of them, there's a W. Transfigure yourself, transform, and reach out to somebody for help if you need it. Connect with other people, talk to other people, and add a little bit more color to your life. That's it for Word Up.
Amen. I have nothing else to say. Bye, folks.
Bye.